And again, Kayla is here with me this morning. She can answer questions as we go. I'm gonna climb down here. There we go. All right. So what we'll be covering this morning is the Power BI Entitlements and Allocations dashboard training. And I will start by just giving you an overview of what we're going to be covering. The first thing, I just want to give you a little bit of background and intention behind these dashboards and what sets them apart from what we currently have in place, which is the PDF version of the entitlements and allocations data. I'm going to launch a poll in a moment just to get a little bit of information from you about your current knowledge of what Power BI is. We will be looking at the entitlements and allocations available currently in the dashboard format. And I do want to preface this by saying that we do consider this to be our jumping off point. So what I'm showing you here today is a starting point, and we want to, there is a survey where we want feedback from you about additional data points that you might feel would be valuable to be represented in this Power BI format. Power BI, as I'll go into in more depth, is a way that you can take data and you can create what's called visualizations. So the data can be represented in a tabular format, which is what I'm sharing with you today, but also the data points can be represented in different graphical representations as well. We'll take a deeper dive into different ways to interact with the entitlements reports. Towards the end of all of that information, I'm going to launch an additional poll just to get some like temperature check, get feedback from you about your current comfort level with the content of what was covered in the training. We'll have more time for questions, and as I mentioned earlier, I will also pause throughout the training just to make sure that we're addressing as many questions as possible. And then the last bit, I'll actually take you into a live dashboard view where I'll interact with the dashboard live and you can see how it works. The very last piece will be that survey that I mentioned earlier. It would be wonderful if you would take a few moments to give us some feedback about your comfort level with what was covered in the training. What you could see might be of additional benefit, things that could potentially be added to the dashboard. And it's just a short survey, so it will just take a few moments of your time. And Kayla will also, towards the end of the training, will drop into the chat a link to that survey. And there's also a QR code at the end that you could utilize as well to give us some feedback. So I'm going to go ahead and launch that first poll, which is basically just giving me an idea of what your background knowledge is currently about Power BI. So what is your prior knowledge and experience with Power BI software and dashboards? Because there are other divisions within TEA that are utilizing these dashboards to communicate with the end user about different data points that they're gathering. Okay. So far, the majority of you are communicating that you've never heard of Power BI. Some of you, a smaller percentage of you do have some knowledge of it. And some of you just simply need more caffeine before you can even think through answering that question, which is understandable. Okay, so let me go a little bit more in depth about what Power BI actually is. So you can see the results of that now. So about roughly 83% of the folks that took the poll have never heard of Power BI before. So Power BI, it's a software and it works very seamlessly with Excel spreadsheets where you can import Excel spreadsheets into the Power BI software, and then you can transform that data and represent the data points in different ways. So, for example, what I'm showing you this morning is a tabular representation of the entitlements and allocations data. Now, you could also take data points and create a pie graph or a pie chart or a bar graph, or there's like so many different possibilities, but it's a software that you can take data, import it into that system, and then transform and work with that data to represent it in different ways. So the intention behind these dashboards is to add to what we already have in place, but add to it in a meaningful and thoughtful way to where we're creating a report that's more accessible and interactive than what we currently have. So as you all know, we currently have the PDF version of the entitlements and allocations information, which is wonderful. I mean, it serves its purpose, but it's not the most interactive format for looking at all of that entitlements and allocations data. So we've been working on a different way of representing that to where you can interact with it and where it's more accessible and individualized. So that's the intention behind these dashboards. Let's see here, froze up a little bit. Here we go. All right, so as I mentioned, with the dashboard, you can create individualized data specifications. So for example, when I show you the dashboard, you'll see that there are filters which are basically sliced through the data. So you could filter it by CDN number, you could filter it by LEA name, you could filter it by the ESC. So you're able to individualize your search within that interactive dashboard. It's very visually appealing and interactive and customizable, so quite different in that respect from the PDF format. You can take large amounts of data and transform and organize it within the Power BI software system. And you can create interactive reports by doing those filtering and searches, as I mentioned earlier. Also, I mentioned earlier how this works very seamlessly with Excel spreadsheets. So we can import those Excel files into the system and create different data models and interactive visualizations with that data. In addition to that, it's just much more accessible. The Power BI software itself has built-in accessibility that's quite different from a PDF, just static file. It has built-in screen reader user accessibility, and it has endless keyboarding shortcuts that you can utilize to interact with the report. I did create a link to a website where it outlines all the different keyboarding shortcuts. Now it's very extensive, so you'll want to take some time if that's something that you're interested in utilizing to pore over that. What I've included here today is more of a snippet of some of the maybe more commonly used keyboarding shortcuts that you might find valuable. I wanted to include I know you're quite well versed with what we already have in place, but I wanted to speak to this a little bit because I wanted to reassure you that this isn't going away. What we have in place right now is not going away. These PDF versions that that are set up as they are in the snippet that I included here, they will still be in place for you. What we're offering is just an additional resource, an additional way for you to go in and look at your entitlements and allocations data. So once this is launched, which will be later this week, I wanted to have the opportunity to walk you all through this before just putting it out on the web page. But what what I built is what you're seeing here on the screen, where this will be the revision to the entitlements page, where there will be a quote unquote button in place that says Entitlements and Allocations Dashboard link. When you click that button, it routes you to the live dashboard. So I just wanted to reiterate that this is an addition. We're not taking away the PDFs that are currently on the entitlements page, but this is what the revision will look like once this is launched, which I anticipate that being on the 29th. There are several different types of dashboards. The first one that you'll see when we go to the live link is the master dashboard. So that's the one that sits in front. And then there are individual dashboards that you can route to that are behind that master. So the master entitlements dashboard right now includes the ESSA Consolidated Federal, the Special Education Consolidated Federal, and Perkins. Once we have updated entitlements and allocations information, we will integrate the Special Education Consolidated State and the Title I School Improvement and Title IV Rural No Income. Those will all be integrated into the master dashboard. And what I mean by master dashboard is that there are columns set up that all the funding, depending upon the grant program, it's all inclusive there. So say you're looking up your district and you want to see all the funding amounts that you have across all the grant programs, that master dashboard, you'll be able to see that in one table. Now, back behind that, broken out more so, is an ESSA Consolidated Federal Entitlements Dashboard. And as I mentioned, the school improvement will be added, the rural and low income will be added. The Special Education Consolidated Federal is back behind that master currently. The state will be added. And then Perkins is already created and behind that master dashboard. So there's the master, which incorporates everything. And then there's the individual ones where you can see the broken out version of the entitlements by that grant program. The PDFs, as I mentioned several times, will stay in place. But in addition to that, on the dashboard page, I'll show you down towards the bottom, there's a link to the PDF version, and there's also a link to the Excel format of the file. So you're going to have additional options for, besides the dashboard, you'll also have that Excel format as well to interact with. These are just, captured images of what the dashboards actually look like. I just wanted to give you a bit of a visual before we move forward. So we have the Perkins, and then as I mentioned, there's the Special Education Consolidated Federal, ESSA Consolidated Federal, and then there's the master. So these are the master. When I show you the live version is the one that sits in front, and then you can navigate to the individual ones back behind it. The actual end user view looks like this. So when you click on that button that will be posted on the entitlements page, it routes you to this dashboard page. There's also a link included here on the dashboard page for those keyboarding shortcuts that I mentioned earlier. There's a bit of information about the dashboards themselves. And then down below here is an image of the master dashboard, and you can see just that one filter so far of the LEA name. Okay, I'm gonna pause here and just check in with Kayla, or do I need to address any questions, Kayla, so far that you haven't been able to get to?
It looks like I actually need to be made a co-host. There was a little snafu and something happened with the system and kicked me off.
Oh, okay. Let me see here. Let me take a look at the chat really quickly. Okay, I'm not sure, Kayla, because you are set up as a co-host. I'm not sure exactly what happened with that, but I'm not seeing questions in the Q&A. I'm seeing a lot in the chat, but I'm not seeing. It looks like you were able to answer some of them, correct?
Yeah, in the chat, I was able to respond. I just can't see if anything's come in the Q&A on my end.
Oh, okay. Well, from my view, Kayla, there are no questions in the Q&A. So
Okay,
that's
great.
probably why. Is there anything in the chat though that has gone unanswered that we need to address?
No.
Okay. All right. So the next bit we will be, I'll show you how you can interact with these reports. What I'm doing first here is just walking you through like a static visual of how to interact. And then as I mentioned earlier, I'll take you into that live view in a moment. So there are multiple ways of sorting the information in these dashboards. One way is if you wanted to shift the order of the data, meaning ascending or descending order, you can click on that column header and it'll sort in ascending or descending order. There's also set up in there what's called a slicer, but essentially it's a filter. You have one for LEA name, there's one for CDN, and there's one for ESC. You can also see here where it says search, you can also type in the specific LEA name or the specific CDN or the specific ESC. So in the case of the LEA name and the CDN, that search feature is really critical because we're working with such a large volume of LEAs and CDN numbers. So that's super helpful if you want to sort the information that way. In addition to that, if you click within the table, if you right click within the table, then you'll get these options that pop up. One is copy value, and that essentially means that whatever specific data point you've selected, it'll copy that. Now, you can, whether you're copying a value or copying a selection, and a selection means like you're copying a grouping of information as opposed to one data point. If you're copying that, then it is very easily pasted into an Excel file. So say, for example, you want to copy a grouping of information, and then you can then paste that into an Excel file. And not only does it paste the data, but it also pastes the column headers. So that is definitely handy. Now, in addition to that, you can show this data in more of a table format, and I'll show you what that means in a moment. You can also include and exclude data. And basically that means sort of what's similar to what the filters do. If you select a certain LEA name, it's going to eliminate all the other data. All you're going to see is that particular LEA. The include and exclude kind of does the same thing. So I feel like the filtering aspect of it, the slicers, where you can search by LEA name, CDN number, ESC, is probably much more valuable to you than the include and exclude feature of that. So there, as I mentioned, when you look at this in report format, you can see where there's up top the tabular dashboard table, but then down below, it's also created this different type of table report. Now, as I mentioned, this can also be flipped vertically. And I'll show you that in a moment when we're interacting with the live dashboard itself. Now, any of these, features that you're clicking on, you can easily get back to the report view by just clicking the back to report button. Another feature, you are able to go into what's called focus mode. So if you hover over the icon in this top right-hand corner, it gives you the option of focus mode. And basically what that means is it's a zoomed in version of the report, which can be, very handy to have that slightly larger view of the data. There's also a keyboarding shortcut that I'll show you later where you can, by utilizing your keyboard, you can zoom in and out as well. So if you were to click that focus mode, this is what it looks like. It's just a slightly more enlarged version of the table. And when you want to go back to the regular report view that you started with, you just click back to report. Okay, I'm going to pause again. If there are any questions, please feel free to ask them before we move on.
There is one question in the chat asking about whether or not you can create a group of districts in a single filter and then save that filter for future use. But I believe you may need to export the data to group specific districts together.
Yeah, you'd want to group specific districts together, and then you could select that information through that copy selection feature I just showed you. And then you would want to then place that in an Excel file for later use. So any selection or sort that you do, you can copy that selection, place it in an Excel format if that's what you would like, and then save that file for later use. Okay, I'm going to move forward unless there are any other questions that we need to address. No, we're good, Kayla? Okay.
We're good.
Okay. All right, this next bit, we'll be talking about some of the more, commonly used shortcuts and accessibility features. Some of the accessibility features I already mentioned, but Power BI has some amazing built-in accessibility that really, to me, differentiate it from other types of formats. There's the keyboarding navigation. Like I mentioned earlier, and definitely utilize that link and look at that web page. There's just a huge variety of shortcut options that you can utilize with the keyboard. There's built-in screen reader compatibility. You can utilize high contrast color views. There's the focus mode to enlarge the text. And then if you want it in the data table format, you can shift to that as well. Some of the frequently used shortcuts that you might find valuable, it's when you're moving back and forth across the table, it's very easy. If you do control right arrow, you can shoot all the way to the end of that table, and then control left takes you all the way back to the beginning. You can select, as I mentioned earlier, individual data points. So say you just want to select one LEA, or you could select multiple data points, copy that selection, and then paste it into an Excel file if you so choose. And when we get to the live version of this, I'll walk you through what it looks like when you utilize these shortcuts. As I mentioned earlier, there is that focus mode, which is very nice, but there's also a way to create a zoom in and zoom out with the keyboard as well. So you can do Control plus or Control minus, depending upon if you want to enlarge your view or make the view smaller. In addition to that, you can select, I already mentioned quite a bit selecting things, but there's ways that you can select non-contiguous rows, which are rows that are not touching one another, and then contiguous rows. So if you're selecting non-contiguous, you would just do the Control left click. If you want to select contiguous rows, so say you've done a search within a specific region and you want to grab all the LEAs within that region, you just do Shift and down arrow and it'll grab all the data points that you want, and then you can do that copy selection feature. So in the PDF that Kayla dropped into the chat, thank you for doing that, Kayla. This is a live link on the PDF. So when you do have time, I encourage you to go in and look at all those keyboarding shortcuts. I'm going to pause one more time for questions before we move forward. Nothing, Kayla?
Nope,
We're
nothing.
good? Okay. All right, I'm going to launch a poll before we move into the live interactive version. And I just want to know, I just temperature check how you are feeling at this point about the content that we've covered. So what your comfort level is. So at this point in the training, what is your comfort level with the content we've covered so far? Do you have a strong sense of the purpose behind this and how you would interact with it? Or do you need additional help? Now, I do want to share with you that after this training, we will make the recording accessible to you online. But in addition to that, on the dashboard itself, there's also a link to the training, the PDF version of the training. So we're going to make sure that there are all types of resources in place for you to utilize as you start to interact with the dashboards. In addition to that, please feel free to reach out to me directly if you need additional assistance or if you have questions about the dashboards. All right, it looks like we're about 50-50 with people feeling very confident or people feeling somewhat confident. And then we have a small percentage that still really feels like they're going to need more hands-on support. So sharing the results of that now. So we genuinely do see ourselves as being in service to you. So as we move forward with this, if you do reach a point where you're having issues or you do have additional questions or you feel like an additional training would be valuable, then please share that feedback with us. There's an avenue for that today via that survey, but also, as I mentioned, feel free to reach out to me directly. Okay, so the next bit, we are going to go into the live dashboard, and probably some of this information will start to kind of come together more so for some of you once you see the actual live dashboard and you see how you interact with it. Let me get out of this. Go. Okay. This is the dashboard itself. So that slide I showed you earlier where there was that button, you would just click on that button on the entitlements page and it routes you to this dashboard page. So here you have your live link to the shortcuts. There's information about the dashboards themselves, and these will be updated as the status of the funding changes. So for right now, we're in the planning stage. When we get into the revised planning stage, this would be updated to reflect that. When we get into the final stage of the funding, this will be updated to reflect that. So with each of the different stages of the funding, this will be updated for you. Now, what you're currently looking at is the Master Entitlements Board. So as I mentioned earlier, this
We aren't
is,
seeing your screen.
you're not seeing my screen?
We only see the PowerPoint.
Oh, okay. Let's see here. Let me close this out. Maybe that will. Let me stop sharing for a moment. Let me try this. What about now? How are we?
Yes, we can see it.
Awesome. Thank you for letting me know that. All right, let's start again. So this is the dashboard. So when you're on the entitlements page and you click on that button that I showed you earlier, it will route you to this page. And this is a link to the shortcuts information. And then this is just general information about the dashboards. And now that you're viewing it, I want to go over again, because this is an important point, that each time the funding amount is revised, then this table, all these tables will be updated. And we will be notating in the column header what stage the funding is in. So for right now, we're in the planning stages. So that's why it says planning. So when we go into the revised planning stage, it will be updated. The final, it will be updated. This master entitlements table includes all the different grant program funding amounts. So what you're looking at right now is ESSA. They're color coded on this master table because it's a lot of information, and it's nice to visually break it down with different colors. So this is special education federal, and this is Perkins. There's also the total amount of the awards. So say, for example, I want to look up Austin ISD. So I'm going to type in Austin, and it pulls up all the LEA names that include Austin in them. And I'm going to select Austin ISD. And then it isolates the information about Austin. If I'm wanting to look up all the LEAs by a region, I can just click on, say, region 4, for example, and it's going to isolate all the data in here that's associated with region 4. In addition to that, if you wanted to search for a specific CDN number, you would just type that CDN number here in the search, and it will bring up just that particular LEA. So if I scroll across now, it only has that specific LEA's information for the ESSA Consolidated, Special Education Federal, and Perkins. I want to show you this, as I mentioned, is the master. So it's going to incorporate all the entitlements information into one for all the different grant programs. Now, right down here, you'll see an arrow, a next page arrow. If I click on this, it takes me to the displays, the tabular displays that are back behind that master. So as I mentioned earlier, we have the master, and then we have the individual tables for the individual grant programs. So we have the ESSA Consolidated Federal table, and all that's incorporated here is the funding that's associated with ESSA. back behind that is the special education consolidated federal. And then finally, back behind that, we have Perkins. So I'm going to go back to the master table. And I'm going to interact with it and show you some of the features that I showed in a more static format earlier. So I'm going to right click inside this table, and then you can see where it brings up the menu of options here. So if I were to select copy, you can see here, or just hovering over it, it brings up the option of copy value or copy selection. Again, value is just one specific data point as opposed to an entire selection that you want to copy. This is the option to show it as a table. And this is what I mentioned earlier, the include, exclude, but essentially you can do that with the filters. If I were to show this as a table, you can see where it comes into this mode, and then I can flip it from horizontal to vertical. And then when I want to go back to the original view of the report, you just hit that back button. The other feature I mentioned earlier was the zoom in and zoom out. So I'm going to do that again. If you hover right here, it says focus mode. And then when you click on that, it takes you into a larger view of the table. And then you just go back to report when you're done with that view. Now, if I want to select, see that's selected now, so then I could copy that selection. If I wanted to copy multiple LEAs, so say I'm region 2 and I want to copy everything within that region, then I'm just going to select, I'm going to hold down my shift button and do the down arrow, and all these are being selected. Right click, copy that selection. And when I copy that, it's just like anything else, like you copy and just paste it where you want it. It could be that you want it in an Excel file or some other different format, but that's how you would grab individual or multiple data points.
Hey, Laura,
Yes,
can we get another demonstration of showing the vertical and horizontal switch again?
sure. So I'm going to right click inside the table. So when you do actually interact with this, a lot of the interaction beyond these filters on the right hand side is actually clicking inside the table. So I'm going to right click inside the table. And then right here, it says show as table, which is just a different table view. So now I'm going to click on that. Now it's going to lead you to a horizontal view here. If I want to flip that to vertical, there's this tab up here that says switch to vertical layout. I'm going to click that, and then it switches it to vertical. Now, if for some reason I wanted to switch back to horizontal, you can see you can just simply click it again, switch back to horizontal layout. So you can work back and forth there. And when you're done with that view, you just go back to report. Are there any other questions, Kayla, that we need to address?
No.
Okay. All right. Great questions. Let's see here. So additionally, I want to show you when you interact, it routes you to this dashboard, but what you'll find here below are additional options for looking and interacting with the data, looking at. We've got the Excel version for each one of these entitlements and allocations reports. You've got the PDF version. And then down here below is a PDF version of the training that you're sitting within right now. So you have an access to that through what Kayla shared in the chat. But if for some reason you needed an additional copy of that, there's a link to it right here as well. In addition to that, we'll make sure that the recording of this training is posted so that you have access to that as well. Any other questions?
Nothing in the chat.
Okay. Okay, I think we covered most of the main ways to interact with these reports. You've got your filters, which are very handy. You've got the focus mode. Oh, that's actually what I want to show you. The keyboarding shortcut for zooming in and out. So I would just click Control and then plus sign, Control minus. So that's another way to zoom in and out of the report in addition to this focus mode. As I mentioned earlier, you can interact with the column headers to sort this information in ascending and descending order. If you want to just get across the report, you can just simply, scroll across it, but you can also do let's see here. The other shortcut for that is to do Control right arrow, and it'll quickly take you to the other end of that report, or Control left arrow. So there are ways to quickly move back and forth besides just simply scrolling across it. And all of that is detailed in the information that we covered earlier in the training. Okay. Any additional questions?
So a few came in.
Okay.
And this one, it was just saying whether or not the additional, like revised final planning, will those dashboards still be available as the new ones are posted?
That's a great question. And I think as I mentioned earlier, we really see this as a jumping off point. So if that's something that you all would find helpful and valuable, there is definitely a way to integrate the new information, and also that you would be able to access what was available previously. So that's something that would be some thinking through in terms of how we would integrate that information. But, we definitely want to meet your needs. So I would suggest that if you have a specific request related to that, or would like to see that integrated, that when you fill out that survey, if you would please put details in there of what you would like to see. And I will definitely be reading through all of that and reflecting on how we can integrate additional things into this that would serve you.
Seems like there's a lot of positive responses to that.
Okay. Because this isn't, this is about you. This is about how this is going to create a platform that's more accessible, that you can individualize more, that gets you the information that you need in a way that is what you need it to be, that's more dynamic than what we already have in place. I mean, we're trying to up our game a little bit here. So yeah, any feedback that you can offer, we will take that and do our best to make this even more dynamic than what it already is. Absolutely. Okay, Kayla, if something else comes up, just let me know. I am going to go back to the PowerPoint. And I want to go down to that there's the, I know Kayla is putting the link for the survey into the chat. Thank you very much for doing that, Kayla. But also here's the QR code. And then also you have access to this QR code through that PDF version that Kayla dropped into the chat earlier. Again, please take some time. It's only 4 or 5 questions. I tried to make it succinct. And I will be looking over any feedback that you offer us. And as I mentioned earlier, we will definitely integrate that into the dashboard. I'd like to thank you all for being here with us this morning. And we do genuinely see ourselves as being in service to you. So please feel free to reach out to me directly. My email is right here, laurasalazar@tea.texas.gov. And thank you very much again for being here with us today. And we appreciate all that you're doing out in the field. And Kayla, thank you so much for helping to answer questions and monitoring the chat.